After last week's opening statements in the Brian Walshe trial, many people, myself included, thought the case was over. There's no way Brian Walshe can overcome the damning searches that were recovered from his devices. If you have not yet had a chance, in the description below, I've linked my prior video where I discussed at great length the opening of the Commonwealth and of the defense and how those searches could mean game over for the prosecution. But now, after a whole week of testimony and cross-examination by the defense, many people are wondering, did the prosecution overreach? Did they go for a grand slam home run and strike out when all they needed was a double to secure his conviction? And did this strikeout also mean the prosecution blew their chance at putting Brian Walshe behind bars for the rest of his natural life? What do I mean? Well, the searches, which we explained before, are very damning for Brian Walshe. But the defense got a little bit more into the timeline behind the searches. The defense pointed out that the majority of the searches that were recovered from Walsh's devices were done mostly on January 1st, 2023, around 4:50 a.m. to around 1 p.m. Now, the last time Anna Walshe was seen alive was January 1st, 2023. She was not reported missing until January 4th, 2023. Why is the timing so important? Because the defense is arguing that the majority of these searches took place after Anna Walshe was already dead. So now, due to not having a body, we cannot pinpoint precisely her time of death. The estimates are around early morning, January 1st. The defense's theory is that if these searches are taking place after Anna Walsh's death, and there does not seem to be a factual dispute regarding the timeline of Anna Walsh's presumed death and the fact that these searches, for the most part, there are some searches that were beforehand, but the most of the damning ones were afterwards. And if they were afterwards, the defense is arguing you cannot say it was premeditated, because where are the searches for Brian Walshe before Anna's death? If Brian Walshe is going ahead and he's Googling all of his crimes and all of his criminal activity, then surely it follows that he should have had some kind of search history come up before Anna Walsh's death. And there were a couple of very limited searches. There was a search about the divorce, and that took place, I think it was December 22nd. I don't have the exact date, but you guys can let me know in the comments what the exact date of this divorce search was. Now, the defense did give a theory, not to get too far off track, but they said the divorce search was really about financial planning, because we know Brian Walshe was already convicted of a completely separate crime. It was a financial related crime having to do with lying about certain artwork. And he had a large restitution judgment that he had to pay. So the idea was, if they get divorced, there could be different implications about whose assets could be made subject to this kind of restitution order. So the defense is saying it wasn't that Brian Walshe knew about Anna's affair and wanted to divorce her. It was just financial planning. Let's take them at their word for it for now. If that's true, the defense is arguing Where are the searches about Brian Walshe intending to commit this crime? Rather, the theory goes it was a sudden death. Brian panicked and did all these terrible things about dismembering the body. Let's say, though, for argument's sake, the jury does not buy Brian's argument about the sudden death, which is very possible because, as we said, your wife dies and you love her so much and you see her dead or at least non-responsive. Is your first act going to be Googling what am I going to do with her body? Or is your first act going to be I'm calling 911? And that leads us to the second theory, which is the prosecution has clearly gone all in on first degree premeditated murder. We know that from the indictment. I've linked to the full indictment below. You can see it, pull it up. But it says in relevant part that Brian Walshe did assault and beat Anna Walshe with intent to murder her. In the opening statement, the Commonwealth said, "We will prove the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of the premeditated murder of his wife, Anna Walshe." So we know that the Commonwealth is going for first degree premeditated murder. So if the jury says, well, the fact that there were no searches before Anna Walsh's death, but we don't believe that Brian Walshe just panicked, maybe there was second degree murder. Maybe Brian found out about Anna's affair, confronted her in the heat of the moment, he killed her, and then he realized he killed her. He needs to get rid of the body. So, quickly, what is the difference between first degree murder and second degree murder? First degree is premeditated. You thought about it, you planned it, you lay in wait, and you specifically wanted to do the act. Like the Adelsons, that's clearly premeditated first degree. They went to the trouble of hiring a hitman. The hitman drove up from South Florida to Tallahassee to go ahead and shoot Dan Markel. Second degree murder, the classic story, the classic example is you do not have time to cool off. You see your wife in bed with another man, you get so angry in the heat of the moment, you go ahead and you kill her. And that is second degree murder. So is it possible that a jury says, we think that Brian Walshe may have committed second degree murder, but not first degree murder? And if the jury says, we think it's possible that second degree murder happened, but the prosecution did not seem to allege that in their case in chief, so we don't believe that the prosecution's theory is correct of premeditation, and we don't believe the defense's theory of sudden death, that leads us to believe neither theory. But if we don't believe either theory, then we cannot convict, right? Prosecution did not prove that Brian Walshe had this premeditation to kill his wife. And therefore, is it possible that because the prosecution went all in on first degree murder, that they blow it and Brian Walshe walks because they could not prove premeditation? And I was wondering that, and I think a lot of people were wondering that. And so I did a little bit of a deeper dive into the Massachusetts law. Massachusetts is a little bit different than many other states. Many states, if that were the case, in theory, if the prosecution did not separately charge second degree, then if they do not prove first degree, the defendant could walk. So I was thinking, did the Commonwealth really make such a critical mistake by not charging second degree? And the answer is no. Massachusetts is a little bit weird. And I'm going to pull up the statute and we're going to see it. But in short, what they do in Massachusetts is they charge you as murder. And then the jury gets to decide which form of murder it was. So let's take a quick look at the statute. So here it is. And this, if you look on the indictment, this is the statute which they charged Brian Walshe under the murder theory. It is Chapter 265, Section 1, murder defined. Murder committed with deliberately premeditated malice aforethought or with extreme atrocity or cruelty. And maybe even that could be an argument. Or in the commission or attempted commission of a crime punishable with death, that's felony murder, or imprisonment for life, is murder in the first degree. Okay, so that's the first degree murder. Now, murder which does not appear to be in the first degree is murder in the second degree. The degree of murder shall be found by the jury. So that's the Massachusetts statute. And it's all in one. There's no separate statute. So what's really going on here, and I think this could be a little bit more fleshed out in some of the coverage of what's going on, is that Massachusetts charges everything as one charge of murder. And therefore, even if the prosecution is going all in for the grand slam, flashy headlines of first degree murder, and they don't get it, there could still be jury instruction where judge could still instruct the jury regarding the elements of second degree murder. And the jury could say, even though the prosecution did not go all in on trying to prove the second degree murder, we still think that Brian Walshe was guilty of second degree murder. And I think that's a real possibility. Now, what is the practical difference? Why does the prosecution want first degree murder? Well, it's simple. Aside from the flashy headlines, first degree, if you're over 18 in Massachusetts, there's no possibility of parole. It is life without parole. Second degree, the maximum sentence is life. And I think pretty clearly everyone agrees Brian Walshe did something really terrible to his wife's body, either while she was alive and he took her life, or even if he did not take her life, what he did afterwards was pretty despicable. And he's going to get life in prison if he's convicted. But there is a possibility of parole for second degree. Having said all that, I think a jury is not going to believe Brian Walshe's story at all. And I think a jury may not think the way we do as a lawyer. They're going to hear what he did, and they're going to hear his calm voice to the police. And even if they believe or don't believe that he knew or did not know about his wife's affair, who cuts up their wife's body? And I think they're going to want to punish him. They see him as just a sick, cruel, evil person. And if he testifies, I don't think that's going to go well for him. I think that would even increase his chances at getting convicted of first degree. And I think the jury will like him even less. I understand a lot of the podcasts are predicting that from a legal perspective, Brian Walshe needs to testify. And they say his lawyer said in opening that the jury will hear from him. However, I just think that if Brian Walshe testifies, the jury will like him even less. And they're going to want to convict him and they're going to want to throw the book at him. We'll see what happens. If you guys enjoy the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you have another take on this, I'd love to know your thoughts on it. drop me a note in the comments and stay tuned. We're going to continue to keep covering this trial. Until next time, though, we'll see everybody later.